Leo's hands tightened around the steering wheel as he cruised along the desolate highway, the familiar sights of the Arizona desert blurring past his truck's windows. The hum of the engine was the only company he had, the radio silence save for static whispers. It was in this solitude that he first spotted her, a lone figure standing on the side of the road, illuminated by the faint glow of his headlights. She appeared almost ethereal, a dark silhouette against the moonlit night. Leo's brow furrowed in confusion. What could a young woman be doing out here, in the middle of nowhere? He hesitated for a moment, contemplating whether to stop or simply drive on, but something about her presence tugged at him, urging him to pull over. Bringing the truck to a halt with a hiss of brakes, Leo watched as the girl approached, her steps hesitant yet purposeful. She wore a tattered dress that fluttered in the night breeze, her long hair dancing around her shoulders like tendrils of shadow. As she drew closer, Leo could see the fear etched into her features, mingling with a desperate determination. It was an unsettling combination, one that sent a shiver down his spine. "Hey there," Leo called out as she reached the side of the truck, his voice cutting through the silence of the desert night. "You okay?" The girl nodded, her eyes darting nervously around the empty highway. I need a ride," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leo studied her for a moment, taking in the dirt smudges on her face and the bruises peeking out from beneath the hem of her dress. There was something about her, something haunted and otherworldly, that both intrigued and unnerved him. "Where to?" he asked, his voice softer now, laced with a hint of concern. "Knoxville," she replied, her gaze never leaving his. "Please, I have to get there." Without another word, Leo reached across and pushed open the passenger door, gesturing for her to climb inside. As she settled into the seat beside him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just opened the door to something far more sinister than he could ever imagine. But with a grim resolve, he pushed the thought aside and focused on the road ahead, unaware of the horrors that awaited them both. The rhythmic hum of the engine filled the cab as Leo drove on, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a lone beacon in the night. Beside him, the girl sat in silence, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape outside. Leo stole glances at her from time to time, her presence a mystery he couldn't quite unravel. There was something about her, something otherworldly, that set his nerves on edge. "You mind telling me your name?" Leo finally broke the silence, his voice rough with the strain of uncertainty. The girl glanced at him, her eyes dark pools of shadow in the dim light of the cab. "Olivia," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rumble of the truck. "Olivia," Leo repeated, testing the name on his tongue. It felt foreign, out of place in the vast expanse of the desert night. "Where you from, Olivia?" He pressed on, his curiosity getting the better of him. For a moment, Olivia hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "I'm not sure," she admitted, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "I've been on the road for as long as I can remember." Leo frowned, a pang of sympathy tugging at his heart. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to wander through life with no sense of home or belonging. "Who are you running from?" he asked softly, already dreading the answer. Olivia's gaze flickered towards him, her eyes haunted by a lifetime of pain and fear. "My parents," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "They're not like other parents." A chill swept through the cab, the weight of her words settling heavily upon them both. Leo swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "What do you mean?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Olivia's hands trembled in her lap, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the windshield. They kept me locked away," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "In the basement, my whole life." Leo's blood ran cold, a shiver racing down his spine. He couldn't begin to fathom the horrors Olivia must have endured, trapped in darkness and isolation. I had to escape, Olivia continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I couldn't stay there any longer. I had to get out, no matter the cost. As her story unfolded, Leo felt a swell of sympathy rising within him, mingled with a growing sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Olivia's tale than she was letting on, that darker forces were at play beneath the surface. But for now, all he could do was listen, his heart heavy with the weight of her words and the knowledge that they were hurtling towards a destiny neither of them could escape. The miles slipped away beneath the wheels of Leo's truck as the night wore on, the desert landscape giving way to rolling hills and sparse forests. With each passing mile, the tension in the cab seemed to mount, a silent specter looming over them like a shadow in the night. Leo stole glances at Olivia from time to time, her presence a constant reminder of the darkness lurking just beyond the edges of their world. She sat in silence, lost in her own thoughts, her eyes distant and haunted by the ghosts of her past. As they drove on, the conversation dwindled to a mere whisper, the weight of Olivia's confession hanging heavy in the air between them. Leo couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her story than she was letting on, that beneath her quiet demeanor lay secrets too dark to fathom. Olivia. Leo spoke up, his voice breaking the silence like a crack of thunder in the night. You said your parents were religious fanatics. Olivia nodded, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the windshield. Yes, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. They believed I was tainted, sinful. They thought they could save me, cleanse me of my demons. A shiver raced down Leo's spine at her words, a chill settling over him like a shroud. He couldn't begin to imagine the horrors Olivia must have endured at the hands of her own flesh and blood, the twisted beliefs that had driven them to such unspeakable lengths. What happened to them? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Olivia's hands trembled in her lap, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know, she admitted, her voice choked with emotion. I ran, and I never looked back. But I can still hear them, their voices echoing in the darkness, calling out to me. Leo's heart ached at the raw pain in her voice, the echoes of a past she could never escape. He wanted to reach out, to offer her some semblance of comfort, but he knew there was nothing he could say to ease the burden she carried. We'll get through this, he said softly, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. Together. But even as the words left his lips, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they were hurtling towards a fate far darker than either of them could imagine, a destiny intertwined with the very fabric of their souls. And try as he might, he couldn't escape the creeping sense of dread that settled over him like a fog, obscuring the road ahead in a veil of uncertainty. The road stretched endlessly before them, the darkness of the night swallowing up the landscape as Leo's truck cut through the silence like a solitary ship navigating through a sea of shadows. Olivia sat beside him, her presence a silent reminder of the horrors they had left behind and the uncertain future that lay ahead. As they drove on, a sense of unease settled over Leo like a suffocating blanket, a feeling that whispered through the darkness like a ghostly echo. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes followed their every move from the shadows just beyond the edge of the road. Leo, Olivia's voice broke through the silence, soft yet urgent. Do you hear that? Leo frowned, straining his ears against the night as he listened for any sign of danger. All he could hear was the steady thrum of the engine and the faint whisper of the wind through the trees. What is it? He asked, his voice tense with anticipation. Olivia shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. But it sounds like voices. A chill raced down Leo's spine at her words, a shiver of dread coursing through him like an electric shock. He strained to listen, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger lurking in the darkness. And then he heard it, faint at first, like the distant murmur of a crowd far off in the distance. But as they drove on, the whispers grew louder, swelling into a cacophony of sound that filled the night with an eerie chorus of voices. Leo's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he scanned the darkness for any sign of their source, his heart pounding in his chest like a drumbeat in the night. But try as he might, he could see nothing but the empty expanse of the road stretching out before them, the shadows closing in around them like a vice. "What is it?" Olivia's voice trembled with fear, her eyes wide with terror. "I don't know," Leo admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But whatever it is, it's not of this world." As the whispers grew louder, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they were hurtling towards a fate far darker than either of them could imagine, a destiny woven into the very fabric of the night itself. And try as he might, he couldn't escape the creeping sense of dread that settled over him like a shroud, suffocating him in its embrace as they drove deeper into the heart of darkness. The night stretched on endlessly, the road disappearing into the darkness ahead like a black ribbon unwinding through the void. Leo's truck pressed forward, the only beacon of light in the vast expanse of the night. As they drove, the whispers continued to echo through the darkness, haunting and persistent. Leo's knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the road for any sign of the source of the unsettling voices. "Leo, we have to stop." Olivia's voice broke through the eerie silence, her tone urgent. Leo hesitated, his foot easing off the gas pedal as he glanced at Olivia. "Why? What's wrong?" Olivia's eyes were wide with fear, her gaze fixed on something beyond the windshield. I can't take it anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to find out what's causing those whispers." With a heavy sigh, Leo nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He pulled the truck to a stop on the side of the road, the engine falling silent as the night closed in around them like a shroud. Together, they stepped out into the darkness, the whispers growing louder with each passing moment. Leo's senses were on high alert as he scanned the shadows for any sign of movement, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. And then, from the darkness, a figure emerged, its form shrouded in shadow. Leo's breath caught in his throat as he stared at the apparition before him, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. Who are you?" Leo stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The figure said nothing, its gaze fixed on Olivia, with an intensity that sent a chill down Leo's spine. And then, with a soundless scream, it vanished into the night, leaving nothing but the echoes of its presence behind. Leo's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to Olivia, his eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice urgent. But even as they fled back to the safety of the truck, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes followed their every move from the shadows just beyond the edge of the road. And try as he might, he couldn't escape the creeping sense of dread that settled over him like a fog, suffocating him in its embrace as they drove deeper into the heart of darkness. The city lights of Knoxville painted the night sky with an eerie glow as Leo guided his truck through the quiet streets. Olivia sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the passing buildings, her expression one of apprehension. "We're almost there," Leo reassured her, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "Just a little further." But as they rounded a corner, their path was blocked by a lone figure standing in the middle of the road. Leo slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding in his chest as he squinted through the windshield, trying to make out the silhouette in the darkness. A chill ran down his spine as Olivia let out a piercing scream. "It's him. It's my father." Leo's blood turned to ice as he saw the man's face illuminated by the headlights. There was no mistaking the hatred burning in his eyes, the twisted features contorted with rage and fanaticism. "You thought you could escape us," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "But you can never escape the will of the Lord." Before Leo could react, Olivia flung open the door and bolted from the truck, her footsteps echoing through the empty streets as she disappeared into the night. "Olivia, wait," Leo called out, but it was too late. She was gone, swallowed up by the darkness, leaving behind only the echoes of her desperate cries. For a moment, Leo sat frozen in shock, the weight of their doomed journey bearing down on him like a suffocating weight. With a heavy heart, Leo put the truck into gear and drove away from Knoxville, leaving behind the echoes of their tragic encounter.